Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Privileged Identity Management for VMware Environments. Giving our presentation today is Patrick McBride, VP of Marketing here at Xsuite, followed by a demo given by Sean Hank, who is Manager of Systems Engineers at Xsuite as well. We'll be holding some time towards the end to answer any of your questions, so as we go along, please feel free to type your questions into the questions box, and we'll make sure that we get to them. We will also be recording this webinar, so everyone will be receiving a copy of the recording within a day or so. I hope you all enjoy your presentation today, and with that, I'll hand it over to Patrick. So whenever you're ready, Patrick, you're all set to begin.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. And thanks for everybody for taking a little time out of your day to join us. We've got a great crowd today, so we're delighted to have you all with us. As Nicole said, I'm going to start off with an overview for the next 20 or so minutes, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sean so he can take us through some of the new capability. Really, the headline for today and the reason we scheduled this webinar is we're really happy that we've just released the latest version of our Xsuite platform. It's available now. If that marketing guy would just get busy and put out the press release, I guess everybody would know about it. Oh wait, that's me. So that'll go out sometime this week or next week. But the new product, the new capability that we'll be talking about today is available actually as of last week. We announced that we were going to be doing this back in February and followed that up last week with general availability. So the big headline is that we're now supporting the VMware vSphere platform with our hybrid cloud privileged identity management platform. And we'll parse all that stuff. We'll go through it. So I wanted to start with a headline, but since as I look through the list, there's quite a few. There's a couple customers on, which we're happy to see, but there's also a lot of folks who may not know us that well. So we thought we'd spend a little bit of time just kind of introducing you to Xsuite, and then we'll go and do some of what we're seeing in the market and some best practices, and finish up with the demo. So without further ado, very quickly, as a kind of an overview of Xsuite, we're a security software company, and we are focused on the privileged identity management area, and again, we'll break that down in a lot more detail about exactly what that means. Our client base is decidedly large enterprises, so it's a global client base. We have customers here both in North America, a few in South America, nice presence in Europe, a large and growing presence in both Asia and the Middle East. So really have customers from all over the place. Our headquarters is here in Herndon, Virginia. Both Sean and I are working out of our Herndon office, our Herndon headquarters today. Sean ends up being on the road a lot, but we're glad that he's here today. And we've got R&D offices in New Jersey, just across the river from Manhattan, and up in Ottawa, Canada as well. As we said, we've got a decidedly large-scale, large enterprise customer base, and they're really split kind of between our commercial presence, which accounts for north of 60% of our customer base, about 70% of our customer base, but we've also got a very large presence both in the U.S. federal government and with governments abroad. And that takes a lot of special certifications if you want to play in that space. So there's some things that we're really proud of there that we've been able to achieve, and we'll hit those as well. In terms of our commercial presence, it's kind of the who's who really in enterprise security. Certainly banking and financial services is a large part of what we do. We've got a large foothold with retail, mostly driven early on by the PCI standards that we help some folks with. We've got a number of stock exchanges that are customers, large food product and manufacturing companies, et cetera. And definitely in energy, growing in energy, growing in healthcare. So, I guess as a blanket statement, the folks that have a lot to protect, or a lot of important things to protect, and are heavily regulated, tends to be the clients that are in our customer base. So what do we do? We really protect enterprises from the risks that privileged users pose to your systems or the data stored in your systems. As a byproduct of that, we really enforce audit and compliance controls that have gotten quite a bit more aggressive these days, especially as it pertains to privileged accounts and privileged users, et cetera. A lot of the, and even if the compliance requirements haven't called them out, which many of them have these days, the auditors are certainly looking at it with a much more careful eye at these accounts, mostly because they're the source of a lot of both insider threat and hacking activity, which we'll cover in a little while. We allow you to manage privilege access and privilege identities across a traditional or virtualized infrastructure, especially with our VMware announcement. Cloud environment, we announced last year a capability for Amazon Web Services, which we won't spend a lot of time on today, but we wanted to make you aware of. And really the overall hybrid environment, and we'll describe that in more detail as well. For that, particularly for folks that are migrating applications to a virtualized infrastructure or out to a public cloud environment, we allow you to take the controls that you're used to having in your on-prem data center and extend them there. So it really provides large enterprises both the security and comfort to be able to migrate their data, their existing applications or their data in some cases for new types of applications out to that environment, and also bring the compliance controls that you're used to having or that you're required to have with you. And a key piece of what we do is federate privilege identity across hybrid cloud environments, and we'll talk to exactly what that means. So one of the places we like to start is really just who are privileged users. When you get into these conversations with folks, it tends to be in the eye of the beholder on who you consider a privileged user, and none of those definitions are wrong, but we just wanted to kind of share with you the definition that we have. So the diagram starts off here with on-premise, folks that are employees or potentially partners that may be working in your offices, on your network, within your physical infrastructure. Those same folks, whether they're employees or partners, the systems and network database and application administrators, they may be working from home, they may be working from a third-party office or from a Starbucks, and all of those things we know that all of our clients are dealing with. If you peel the onion back a little bit more, there's a new class of really super user that has kind of cropped up in the age of virtualization and cloud computing. In the VMware environment or the virtualized environment, it's the VMware vCenter administrator. These folks no longer just have access to various different root accounts, for example, or admin accounts on specific hosts that they're managing. They have access to the control panel for all of the VMware infrastructure, where you can delete, move, change, etc. And there's an analog in the AWS environment, in the Amazon Web Services environment. They've got the AWS Management Console, which provides the same type of really uber super user control over the whole cloud infrastructure for an organization, so that you can spin up tens, hundreds, or thousands of new nodes and spin them down or copy and move them, etc. So clearly a new class of very important account that needs to be managed. We throw these in here, these latest two, the unauthorized user and the hacker, because very often if we start off the discussion, people kind of get the idea that we're only talking about insider threat, but that's absolutely not the case. The kind of protections that we put in place also help out with the unauthorized user or the hacker. So this first class, unauthorized user, tends to be, in our definitional space, a systems or network administrator, for example, that used to be on a project team and had access to a set of servers that they needed to work on and manage, that may have left the project team, it's on a different project. They might have left the company. They may have been employed by a third party and are no longer with that third party. So providing them, with the passwords and providing them access to machines is something that sometimes happens by accident, because they get new credentials or get new access, and that never goes away when they change roles, change jobs, etc. And on the last one here is the hacker, and we're not, so the idea here is that we're not stopping malware or APT, but very often those kinds of tools that hackers are using are going after privileged credentials, privileged accounts. So it's one thing to grab somebody's general end user account. That'll certainly give you, some accessibility to steal things, but it's a whole lot better for a hacker if they can, grab the credentials or access to an administrative account somewhere. So by locking down those privileges and by controlling that, you won't stop malware, you won't stop APT in its tracks, but you can render it, significantly less effective. And the last one we want to point out here is, these aren't people at all. So they're, not really privileged users, but they're places where unauthorized people may be able to get access to passwords. Very often, organizations have enclosed passwords, to some of their most, significant assets, their databases, their other applications, their financial applications, et cetera, in applications or scripts. One of the scenarios or use cases that we see is a holding company structure where you're doing the roll-ups of the financials on a weekly or monthly basis. Well, the holding company may have an application or script that goes out and interrogates the financial database at lots of different subs and pulls that data in. And guess what? In those scripts or those applications are in clear text sitting the password. So that means that two things that go wrong there. They become very often changed. If you go change the passwords or roll the passwords on your database servers, you end up breaking applications. It's hard to coordinate. On the other hand, those passwords are visible to anybody with access to the source code machine, which may be folks that work for you, or those may be third parties that are part of your application development organization. So that's kind of the whole picture as we like to paint it for just who are privileged users. So we thought we'd start with this idea of what some of the best practices that we run across. And this is really a list that we've compiled over time that's based in what some of the analysts are telling us, what some of the Verizon Data Breach Report tells us, just things that we've collected over time. Some of them have to do with tools that you implement. Some of them have to do nothing with tools. So just going down the list, making sure that you actually have a process in place for onboarding or offboarding privileged users. That may include, if you've got really interesting stuff to protect, that may or should include background checks on individuals that may go beyond just the usual background check that a sysadmin may go through to figure out if he's if he can do the job. It may even require contractual language with third parties, et cetera. Ensuring that those folks are spun up on the policies and have the training. So all of those things kind of go with implementing a process. Again, has nothing to do with a tool. Implementing least privilege. I mean, this is the starting point, for these accounts. Make sure that folks only have the access to the things that, based on their job role, which these days changes more often than it used to in the past, but based on their current job role, they should have only access to the things that they need to do their job. So it's only access to the appropriate devices, only access to the appropriate functional ways to get to those things, only access potentially to even certain commands. I can do certain things, like I can spin up certain things, but I might not be able to reboot a server, for example. Implementing strong auth is important. At a minimum, strengthening the user ID password combinations. But we all know what that brings up. If you make the passwords too strong and hard to remember, people do what? You all thought it. They write them down, or they put them in a spreadsheet. If they aren't already there, especially if you've got hundreds and thousands of servers that you're managing, you've got you're either using the same password, et cetera. All the bad things that happen there. So. More importantly is implementing multi-factor authentication, real strong authentication, so that you know exactly who's getting it here, who's going to have access. A big piece of this is separating authentication from authorization. And that means just because you're on the network doesn't mean you're entitled necessarily to do anything. So removing direct endpoint accesses, and this is where a lot of companies that have called us in to work with them, they've tried lots of things. They've tried kind of traditional perimeter defenses, but again, once you're on the network, very often, that's the M&M, story, right? Hard on the outside, soft in the center. Once you're on the network, once a sysadmin's on the network and happens to have passwords for different servers, it's very easy for those guys to traverse the network and get to them. It's also easy for a hacker to do that as well, of course. So just because you are authenticated as a user doesn't mean that you should actually have access to things or have entitlements to do things. Certainly managing those privilege account passwords, we've already talked about that, ends up being important, particularly the ones for those console accounts that are the new super user accounts. Moving on, ensuring that you can attribute, and this is a big audit point issue. This is the question that we see auditors asking all the time, and I call it the, can you tell me who was root at 2 o'clock on Tuesday on a particular server? If you can't answer that question, then we haven't done this. Ensure that you've tied a privileged session to a specific individual, not just an IP address or a shared account. And that when you're logging that information, you can attribute everything that they did back to that specific person. So attribution is a big one. It's one of the things that, in addition to password management and managing those credentials, is a big one for the auditors. Sets, or you've got more critical accounts, for example, those management console accounts, you've got to take extra precautions. This is kind of goes back to just general risk management protections and models. Being able to lock out accounts, or if somebody's had a violation in a proactive way, or being able to alert somebody proactively on a violation. I take a little exception here, sometimes having been in the industry for a long time and sat on both the analyst side and sat on the end user side for quite a while, of the SIM vendors, great tools, absolutely have to have them in place. So not even a backhanded compliment here, guys, but very often, when people are trying to attribute identity, to a specific person, you're or figuring out who might have done what, if you've got to crawl through all kinds of log data and and piecemeal together, all right, who was root on Tuesday on this thing by looking at log data, then you're probably not doing the kind of proactive things that you need to, either alerting that there's a violation going on, or being able to lock out a particular session if they try something. You don't want to be trolling through logs that are days or weeks old to find out that a privileged user was doing something that they weren't supposed to do. By then the damage is very often done. And the last is something that that we certainly are a proponent of, and we're seeing a lot more of the analysts talk about. Be able to record everything, know exactly what happened on these particularly important accounts, or at least on their most important servers or network devices, for example. So that's kind of our top 10 list, and as you'll see, as you saw, some of those have nothing to do with us or a tool. A lot of those have to do with kind of general risk management best practices and process things that you need to think about having in place. And I would say, don't exactly believe us. We've talked a little bit about, sometimes you get into these discussions and people get the mind's eye picture that we're only talking about an insider threat, folks that you've hired or contracted with to do the work. But again, if you take a look at the Verizon data breach investigation report, and the whole goal of that report was to dissect lots and lots of hacks to figure out exactly what happened in those hacks, figure out the who, what, when, and how they did it. If you go directly to, this is from, this is almost verbatim out of the 2012 report. If you go directly to the recommendations for the biggest hacking kinds of scenarios, whether it's use of stolen credentials or malware, et cetera, you'll see the the mitigation strategy that they've put in there based on the knowledge that they found in dissecting these hacks. They all have to do with restricting administrative rights and privileges and locking down those kinds of passwords. So obviously, this is just an idea of where the stuff came from. You can see some of the information that informed our top 10 list. So now let me take you and talk, give you kind of a summary overview before Sean takes you through the demo here. So our Xsuite platform is a platform that allows you to control and audit all privilege access no matter where your infrastructure lives. If it lives in bare metal installs in a traditional data center, Windows or Linux box or Unix box, if it lives in a mainframe or an AS400, we support those things too. With the announcement now, we support that infrastructure living up on a virtualized data center on the VMware vSphere, ESXi infrastructure, for example, and the vCenter server. We control, we do all the things that we that we do for the guest systems to the management console as well. And we play that same playbook in the AWS public cloud environment. So whether you have instances running up in the public cloud, or need to control access to the management console, we can do that. And the list of things that we can do we'll go through, and you'll get to see, but it's vaulting of credentials, a centralized authentication mechanism, a federated identity capability we talked about, single sign-on, role-based access control, etc. So we'll go through this, and Sean will show you some of these things as we go through the list. One thing I want to point out before we leave is we're the only vendor that does this, but we've provided really ultimate choice here. You can run our software on our hardened appliance. It's a purpose-built, highly secure hardware appliance that you can rack and stack in your environment. It never ceases to, it always happens, right? Murphy's Law. If you get on a call, then you end up having a call come in, and I can't turn that phone off. So apologies for that. So we can run it on the hardware appliance. With this announcement, we can run a soft appliance or a virtual appliance directly on the VMware environment. It's an OVF styled virtual appliance, or you can run it from the Amazon environment as an AMI, an Amazon machine image. Now, just for clarity, any one of those devices, any one of those form factors that you can run our software stack on, and it's the whole software stack. You basically drop it on the environment and configure and go. You can run it anywhere, and each one of those scenarios or form factors can protect across this whole environment. So if you chose, you could run not only your public cloud or protect your public cloud environment, but also your traditional data center devices using our AMI as an example. And the opposite is true. From our hardware appliance, you can protect cloud and virtualize infrastructure. So it's really what makes the most sense for you as a customer in terms of where you'd like to run that. Let me give you just a very quick overview of some of what you'll end up seeing in the demo, just to give you kind of a mind's eye picture of what's happening. So we've got a really, really simple use case scenario here. A sysadmin needs to get to a file server to do some administrative functions. That server could be living, that could be a bare metal Unix install. It could be a Windows box. It could be living on VMware. It could be living up in the cloud. The first thing that you need to think about is vaulting and managing those credentials. And so vaulting's easy. It's encrypting the credentials, not storing them in spreadsheets, etc., making them not available actually anymore to the end users. But it's also managing them, which means enforcing certain password length, some password composition kinds of rules, etc., and even some password rotation policies, etc. So that's what we mean by the manage piece. That happens, before that's kind of the first step. Next is being able to positively authenticate users, and for us that means supporting multi-factor authentication, capabilities that you already have in place that you'll see when we go through this. Controlling access to target systems. Just because you're auth doesn't mean you have access. So separating that authentication to access to specific devices. Monitoring those sessions in a proactive way and being able to prevent unauthorized commands. If you're not supposed to be able to drop database or drop table, then the system shouldn't let you do that. Recording those sessions so that you can go back and look at them. If there is a violation, you can go back and see exactly what happened, when it happened, etc. Prevent leapfrogging we didn't talk a lot about, but many of you know, if you've dissected kind of hacking activity, very often the model that hackers use, or even internal threats, is to gain a foothold on to one device and use that as a jump-off point for other devices. So being able to prevent leapfrogging so that you're circumventing the target system access control is another capability. And then being able to attribute the identity to a specific user. We've positively auth this guy with multi-factor authentication or GAL on the front end, and then on the back end, even if you're using shared accounts, root accounts or admin accounts, which most of our enterprises are using because of the easy way that is to set up your environment. It's really hard to put all these separate accounts on for each individual user, so people use shared accounts. But being able to tie that user that you've authenticated to exactly what they did when they were on that box is particularly important. And so with this announcement, we do all of those things for the VMware environment, and that really gets split into two different things that we're representing here. You can do it for all of your guest systems, so your Unix, Linux, Microsoft servers running on the VMware hypervisor, for example. But it's also important to be able to control that access for the VMware or the vCenter server accounts that are, these super user accounts, and certainly in the AWS environment for the equivalent management console accounts here. So we do the things that we just talked about. We can record all the activities. It doesn't matter if you're managing a guest system or managing the vCenter server and running with that. As we said, that's also important in the AWS scenario. So, same scenario there. So this just gives you a mind's eye, of the various things. We're going to send this presentation out, so you'll have a copy of this if you want to refer back to the core capabilities of Xsuite, and Sean will show you some of the nuances here. And to finish up with, I think, we are really, really excited about this VMware announcement. We've had a hybrid cloud strategy in place, for 18 to 24, actually more like 2 years. A lot of our clients pushed us really hard to be able to protect their infrastructure, whether they were running it in on-prem in a virtualized environment or up in the public cloud environment. All of them were looking at that. Different customers are moving certainly at different speeds into those environments. Most everybody's doing a lot of stuff on the VMware environment. We've got a lot of customers, though, that are also doing things up in AWS. So, the idea of having this kind of comprehensive set of well-integrated controls across this whole hybrid cloud infrastructure is particularly important. The choice of form factor and the fact that we can manage both the vCenter server or protect both the vCenter server and the guest systems ends up being important. So, those are some of the key things. Stuff that we haven't talked about that I did want to point out is two points here. One is, it's one thing for a software product to work in a cloud environment or work in a virtualized environment, but that's wholly different from being designed for a dynamic, highly elastic cloud environment. And I'll give you an example. If you spin up 1,000 servers, you're a retail organization getting towards Christmas time, and you spin up hundreds or thousands of servers to deal app servers, web servers, maybe some database caching capability, just to be able to deal with the Christmas rush. The last thing you want to have to do is go hands to keyboard, to either discover those devices or, more importantly, to provision them. The whole idea of cloud and virtualized infrastructure is that you can move at a much more rapid rate in addition to the cost savings. And so, any security product that isn't designed to automatically discover and then provision that stuff with the appropriate policies automatically, if you're not doing that, you're really faking it. You're not a modern tool. So now the other piece is, with our enterprise client base, certainly performance and scalability are huge. With our Fed customer base going through some real scrutiny with processes like the common criteria or being FIPS 140-2 validated, end up being just steps that we have to take, and it certainly provides even our commercial customers a lot of comfort that we've had to take those aggressive steps to get our product tested. So those are some of the things that we wanted to point out pretty well. Sean, what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Sean, and got a little bit going on in the network there. Sounds like it's a little garbled. Let's try that again.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, Well, let's keep going. I might stop you there, Sean. It is a little bit garbled. Are you? And I don't. Are we up with your screen yet?
I'm going to share it right now. You should be able to see it right now. You should see a big Xsuite logo and a login. All right, great. So, question come up all the time about Xsuite and kind of what our product does and how it works. We spend a lot of time talking about privileged identity and access management, federated identity management and such. And really at the end of the day, Xceedium and Xsuite as a product comes down to really being able to do things. Monitor, audit, track, and record everything that users do on target systems. After we say that, the next step is always, well, how does the product work? And so what I'm going to do in the context of VMware vCenter is go through a couple of instances to show exactly that. Right off the bat, I should let you know that there are a number of different ways that you can authenticate to Xsuite as a platform. You can choose to leverage two-factor authentication and take advantage of our native integration with RSA. You could leverage third-party two-factor authentication tools and use Radius, the Xsuite Radius connector to communicate to other two-factor authentication tokens. You get to be pretty creative when it comes to being able to authenticate with other tools. We have some customers that use SMS-based two-factor authentication and taking advantage of the inherent geofencing capability that smartphones have today when they authenticate, and we can support that through the Radius connector. Of course, we support Open LDAP and LDAP Active Directory instances, and we even have the ability to do what we call composite authentication, where I can take 2, sometimes 3, maybe even 4 different factors of authentications across multiple different zones inside of your environment and be able to authenticate that way as well. One of the comments that Patrick made earlier that I want to really be sure that we get a chance to talk about is the ability to separate out the existing authentication from the access and authorization or accounting aspects of the product. So one of the problems or the challenges, I'll say, that we have with the existing security model is that when a user authenticates to a network with a domain credential, by right, they pretty much have access to everything on the network. They have footprint on the network, really easy for them to open up a command line session, kind of sniff around on the network that they've given access to. And there's literally an entire industry that's been spawned off of this concept of being able to control users to specific resources, and we do that as well. The really unique thing about us, though, is that our default policy is one of no access, meaning that even if you successfully authenticate to Xsuite and you have an entire back-end network, hundreds or thousands of devices, hundreds of thousands of servers that are in your environment, you won't be able to access any of them unless you have an express written policy in Xsuite that gives you access to those resources. So I've authenticated successfully here with an account, but as you can see here, I don't have any access policies defined, and because I don't have them whitelisted here, there's nothing for me to do. I can't access or touch anything. A really, really important concept. So to that end, I've got a couple use cases that I want to share. This first use case is going to be with a user account, Sally. Sally is a local account on Xsuite. She's not, there's no kind of integration that's being done with her account. It's a locally installed credential here on the Xsuite platform, and she's going to have a permission that we call a standard user role. Essentially what that means is we've whitelisted the ability for her to have access to, in this case, a vCenter instance with 2 different mechanisms. First, single signed her into the vCenter vSphere client, the virtual infrastructure client if you want to use the appropriate nomenclature. And that's all she has access to on this box. Notice there are no desktop icons, there's no muted start menu or status bar or little clock in the lower right-hand corner. The only application she has access to is this vCenter client. Now, we've automatically logged her in with the limited type access credential, meaning she doesn't have full access permissions or full privileged rights on this particular instance that we've launched here. The only thing that she can do is launch inside of vCenter is get access to a subset of devices, in this case a Linux resource, and inside of that she only has read-only permissions. So here you can see that all of the options that a normal administrator would have or some type of privileged user would have are all grayed out for the role that Sally's been assigned. And we've been able to marry a couple different things. Number one, we've been able to take advantage of built-in Active Directory infrastructures and GPOs. And we've been able to take advantage of the built-in permissioning systems that are part of vCenter and vSphere. So by taking advantage of existing accounts that already exist in these 2 various repositories, we've been able to provide a third layer of control, whitelist access to the server, whitelist access to the application, and inherit the account roles for Sally without her ever needing to know what the username or the password is to get to this target system. And by hiding or obfuscating the credentials from Sally, you've now just ensured that access to this environment is completely protected. When Sally's work is done, you don't have to worry about her still having the credentials to those systems. On the back side here, what I'm going to show, the limitation of the account that we've assigned for Sally shows that she's got read-only access, and you'll notice that on the console page here, it's all blacked out in gray. And as we go into the permissions page, you can see here's the credential or the role that we've assigned her, and that it's a read-only role, and she only has access to the Linux group. So again, the concept here is being able to provide this level of flexibility and capability to be able to support further granular controls around which users can have access to specific accounts and privileges. Okay, pretty neat stuff. If I close this session, you're going to notice that automatically the desktop application is now gone. Similarly, in addition to being able to support RDP and record those sessions, which I'll jump to in a second, Sally also has permissions to actually get that same level of information, but do so leveraging the web infrastructure client. We see a lot of customers leveraging VMware, and a lot of customers specifically leveraging the web client for remote access. Okay, so here you're going to see me log in. If I can actually type today. And I'm going to log into this vSphere web client. Be aware that inside of this session that we've launched, we're recording everything. So not only have I recorded everything that took place in the THIC client, the virtual infrastructure vSphere client, but I'm also recording everything that takes place inside of this web session. And again, because I've logged in with the same account that Sally has, you'll notice that, again, the only resources I have access to are the Linux resources. And even if I can right-click and go to the Power Configuration Inventory and Snapshots menu, the only thing I can really do is look at information, but I can't actually change it. Again, very, very important to understand that we've given this VM Linux account mapping to Sally's account through Xsuite. So again, taking advantage of all the inherent roles, all the inherent permissions, all the inherent privileges that you already have. They don't need to be reconstructed and reorganized to use with Xsuite. We just inherit them automatically just by managing the account. A very, very seamless process for us. Okay, so I'll close this session. I'm actually going to log out. And I'm actually going to start a different use case now. In this case, I'm going to log in with a different account. I'm going to log in with Bill's account. Bill just happens to be, in this case, a domain user. So I can actually log in to a specific domain, in this case, Xsuite. And when I log in with Bill's account, what you're going to notice, again, on the same machine, there's a different set of whitelist permissions that Bill has. So in addition to the virtual infrastructure client and the VMware web client, he also has access to connect, let's say via SSH, to the Splunk server. Maybe there's an upgrade that he needs to do. Maybe he's got some additional capabilities or additional functions that he needs to perform, so he needs an additional level of access. Notice again, we put a little warning up here that says all of the actions are being logged, monitored, and recorded. Blends right in quite nicely. And notice that there wasn't a need for Bill to know the actual account or login. You can see here that the host prompt gives you the user account that he's logged in with, as well as the host name of the appliance. From here, I can just perform, standard functions, doing an ls of the environment. Maybe I want to cd to the root. Do that. Do an ls again here, just to kind of show you that things are working. Now, let's say in this particular use case, I want to SSH to another resource. Okay, I have just so happened to create what we call a containment policy that prevents Bill and the account demo on this Unix machine from being able to actually make outbound connections via SSH or Telnet or any other command. So being able to contain a user to a specific subsystem in question is another feature of the product. Not only contain them to the resource, but prevent specific commands from being executed. Maybe I want to do a service network restart. In this case, I just want to restart networking services on the box. Notice that, again, after typing in the command to get that to be executed, we've been able to actually prevent that command from executing at all. And of course, if I want to try to escalate privilege, right, you'll notice in this instance that the session's been terminated and he's no longer has access to that environment. Okay. There's a question that just popped up I'm going to answer real quick as part of this. It says, will there be a future webinar to present AWS integration? The VMware functionality looks great. Number one, we have done previous AWS webinars. I don't know if we still have them in a recorded function and can get you that information. I'm sure we can. But again, I think, Pat, from a marketing perspective, you guys are running these types of webinars all the time, correct?
That's true. Yeah, I think we've got a recorded one. So if I'll get the link and shoot that out so you can at least look at the recorded one. And certainly, if you need to dig in any further, we'd be happy to set up an individual session so that you can ask all the specific questions in your context.
Okay, great. Moving on, so I've kind of shown some of the VMware functions, the recording of the sessions. I'm going to actually jump in now, and I'm actually going to connect to an RDP session to a Windows 2003 server. Now, most of the time what happens in any kind of an environment, you'll see that in this case, Bill has been given permissions to log in via RDP to this box. Notice what's unique here. He's actually presented with a login prompt, and the reason he's actually presented with this is because I've defined the policy in such a way that allows him to see this. Now, if Bill has an account and he knows what the password is, he's by and large free and clear to log in and perform his activity. We're still recording the session here. But in reality, what we really want to do is block or limit the knowledge of those passwords, because as soon as the password is available and someone knows it, stored on the local machine in cache, that's where the advanced persistent threat, the malware, and all those types of things can go ahead and comb that box and try to catch that out of memory, and we want to prevent that from happening. And so this is a way that we can do that, right? I'm going to log out here in just a second to show some additional capability, but before I do, I want to do this compare and contrast for the VMware environment.
Hey, and Sean?
Yeah.
While you're there, got another. So as you're switching gears here, we got an excellent question. Is will the system be compatible with the use of CAC, PKOF, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a common access card that the federal government has mandated use for. It's the DoD-centric one. The non-DoD and Intel community uses the PIV card, but there are smart cards that for authentication. So if you want to hit that one as well.
It's a great question. Let me just go ahead and see if I can log in here 1 second. Just a minute to do that. The short answer, whoops, come back here. Thank you. The short answer is yes. In fact, I don't have it configured in this particular environment yet, but I have installed here the active client. So we support a number of different smart cards. And yeah, they'd be granted access. Pretty straightforward process for us. Okay. I'm just making sure that my login is correct here. Give me just a moment. Let's see if this will work for me. All right, so guess what? I don't know what my password is on that side, but that's okay because I can show the same functionality here. I guess I could look at the credential. In the current release of the software, we do have the ability to log in to be able to get access to the password. In this case, that's what I'm doing right here. So you're seeing this functionality. So you can see that as I try to authenticate a second time to view the password, there it is, right? So this is my password for me to get access to the system as an administrator. Okay, pretty complex password that I'm using. I also have the option to just simply use the VIC again. By using the VIC, what'll end up happening here is I'm automatically signed in with the administrative credential. Okay, and when I'm logged in with the administrative credential, I essentially have full rights to be able to perform any action that I want to on the box. In addition to having access to the Linux infrastructure that Sally had access to, Bill now has access to the Windows environment as well as the Xsuite virtualized instances that we're running here as well. Okay. Also, because of the way that we've configured the access rights for the console user that we used here, you'll notice that Bill's going to actually have the ability to log in and actually perform work on the console tab. So again, being able to actually get on the appliance, not only use the Xsuite instance as a hardware device or as an AWS instance, but actually running it inside of our own vCenter instance to be able to support all the other virtual machines that you see running in this ESX data center. We're sort of swallowing our own dog food when we say that we support the OVF format, because we do that, and we're using it to provide protection in the own environment here. Now, what I'm going to do is log out of here again, because it's great that we've shown some of this functionality and capability, but I want to show some of the more Xsuite-centric administrative capabilities that we've got. So I'm going to log in with an administrative account. Make sure I got it all correct here. All right. You'll notice that there's a lot of information that we're tracking in addition to the number of licenses, number of devices, and user accounts and password accounts that are being managed. We actually will see that the administrator has a little bit more capability here. Okay. Now, what I'm going to show is some of the integration that we've been able to accomplish as a result of this. So first thing I'm going to do is launch back into the VIC instance. Okay. Let that be open here for a little while. Notice I'm logged in with the administrative credential. My session starts off in the same session right where I left off when I was logged in with Bill. Let me take a moment while this is just running in the background for a few minutes to go ahead and kind of review some of the activity that's taken place inside of Xsuite from a logging perspective. If you remember, I had originally logged in at the start of the demonstration to show Sally's activity inside of the environment, and you can actually see all of that here. Sally opened a web portal session to the VMware web server instance, right? Sally made a connection to a vCenter server here, and we were actually able to complete the recording of that session soon after the fact. Okay, we recorded the web session. Then we turned around and we logged out as Sally, and we logged in as Bill. If you remember, we logged in as Bill, and then we ran an SSH session, and we saw that there were unauthorized commands that were being typed out. We actually captured this in the recording. So the cool thing about our logs is, you know, I logged in with an account called Demo on the Unix system, but all of the activity is still traced back to the individual user ID that logged into Xsuite. This is the reference that we talk about to being able to attribute user activity. In my opinion, it's sort of like the best of both worlds. I don't have to have individual user accounts with different sets of privileges on every single system in my environment or inside of a domain structure or Active Directory LDAP structure. I get to be able to have specific accounts with specific privileges, and I can share them with users because I'm actually able to map the attribution of the activity and the privilege to the actual person doing the work. So in this case, very, very good for us to be able to show this kind of capability. Now, let me jump down here and actually click on View Recording, because this is another neat little thing that we're able to do. Two different ways that we do this. Number one, we have a SHA-1 verification on every single recording file that's created. So for proof of controls, for being able to provide this in a court of law, all those types of things, being able to have this verification of the original file when it's created and have it come back as being valid is very, very important. Notice, if you will, here, if I expand this, we know who the Xsuite user ID that was inside of this session. Okay. We also know that inside of this session, he was logged in with the demo account because that's what shows up in the host prompt. If you remember, when we did this, I ran an lsal after I cd'd to root, and then I tried to execute the SSH command. Then I tried to see the violation. Then I tried to use the restart command, and then I had the sudo command that was executed as well. So being able to capture that all in real time and play that back for you in very short order. From there, we went on and connected to the Microsoft SQL 2003 box, Windows 2003 running SQL 2008 server. Was able to capture all of that and then go ahead and get into the vCenter server over the web interface as well. So if you don't care about the logs as much, by the way, we can send all these logs to a syslog server, up to 2 different syslog destinations of your choice. Not a problem for us to do that. I showed the Debian instance. Let me show you what the recording looks like for the quick Windows 2008 session that we were in earlier. Okay. Here you'll see the login prompt that was displayed. Again, the SHA-1 verification taking place. This is a very, very small 50-second recording, and you can see we're only eating up about 41 kilobytes worth of space. I have other ones that I did earlier as I was preparing for this. Let's look at Sally's session. Her, where'd it go? Sally's web session recording. Let's look at this one. Okay. showing Sally's automatic login, automatic population of the vCenter client, single sign-on functionality from the Xsuite web interface to the target server here. Again, just capturing all the information, being able to play it back in real time. Very, very, very cool. Now, one of the questions we always get is how large are the session recording files? How do you store that? Is there a client required to be able to perform this activity? We assume about 250 kilobytes worth of hard drive storage per minute of session recording. In this case, this is going to be a little bit larger than that because there's a lot of activity going on, a lot of mouse movements, a lot of screen changes and such as we record the protocol. But we estimate about 250 kilobytes of hard drive storage per minute of recording. I have some that I've seen that are 10, 20, 30 gigabytes in size for remote desktop sessions that have gone on for weeks at a time. It's not an issue for us to be able to scale out to those very large sort of file sizes. Being able to show, in this case, a web instance. Let me go ahead and launch this particular recording showing vCenter web launch. Again, being able to capture the recording. Let it play back here. Okay. By the way, just so we're clear, Xceedium, as far as I'm aware, Xceedium is the only one. It's one of our competitive, unique differentiators. We're the only ones that have this ability to provide a native recording of web sessions within the context of Xsuite and its capabilities. So again, launching this particular session, being able to record it, leveraging the built-in capabilities of Xsuite to launch that and have it show is something that we have the ability to do. Again, I'll call that my unique selling proposition for everyone that's on the phone. And if you want more information about that, we'd be happy to provide it for you. Jump back over here to the Access page real quick and go ahead and continue on inside of my remote desktop session here. One of the unique things that we have the ability to do is auto provision and auto import from VMware. By the way, the same sort of features are also available inside of our AWS offering as well as in our hardware platform. No matter what we try to do and how often we try to make this work, some customers just say, I want to be able to perform activities with my own hardware box. I don't want to use a virtual instance. I want to be able to store all of that stuff behind my own brick and mortar, not keep it in an infrastructure as a service provider. We understand that. That's the purpose of us having all of these different platforms to choose from. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go up to the vCenter instance. I already have the data center defined. But what I want to do is actually go to my virtual machine here, and let me do this. Whoops, go back here. Go to the data stores. What I'm going to do right now, you're going to notice a couple things. Number one, let me see if I can put these things a little side by side. There we go. Okay. It's always good to be able to have a big screen to do this. What I'm going to do is browse this data store. And the reason I'm going to browse the data store is because while I do have a number of different resources that are available to me, VM-wise, I don't have all of them imported into Xsuite right now. Okay, so if I actually go to look at this list, you're going to see that I have a few. I have 9 devices that are here in total. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually import and add to my vCenter inventory this Sophos UTM. It's a unified threat management tool. I'm going to add that to the inventory, and I'm going to add that underneath the Linux folder inside of my ESX data center. And I'm going to select the ESX server that's going to be imported to, and say finish. Okay, that's imported. That's number one. Let me go ahead and also add this Red Hat instance. You'll notice that there is no listing for Sophos here. There is a listing for this Red Hat instance, but it hasn't been updated. So what I'm going to do is actually update it and say add to the inventory. I'm going to also add that to the Linux folder. Oh, it exists. All right, give me 1 second. There was one.
Muted.
One. There it is, Ubuntu. That's the one that it is. Let me go ahead and add this to the inventory. And I'm going to add that to the Linux folder. And pick the data center. And say finish. So now what I've just done is I've imported 2 new VMs inside of the infrastructure. If I go back over here to the inventory view, and I go to the VMs and templates, you'll see now that I've got the Sophos UTM and the Ubuntu server that are here. What I'm going to do is just click on Refresh VMware Devices. We've got a configuration that allows us to auto-import and auto-update the listing of the virtual devices that are inside of your vCenter instances. But for purposes of the demo here, I just want to speed things up, so I'm not going to wait the 5 minutes or 1 minute to do it. Once I've done that, you'll notice that we've imported the Sophos UTM device. We've got the Ubuntu server here, and my total device count has gone from 9 to 11. What's even more interesting than being able to have these things auto-discover and auto-import is we automatically match the VMware grouping that we've seen. So in this case, if I look at my device groups, you'll see Linux group V228. We've automatically included the Sophos UTM into the Linux group, as well as the Ubuntu server into the Linux group, and automatically applied a default access policy of SSH. What this basically gives you is the ability to predefine policies and predefine rules in such a way that you can have group-based policies, and when you add VM instances to your infrastructure, automatically have those devices inherit any of the existing access policies that are involved in your whitelist policies that you define to users. Again, it's a speed to market, speed to access kind of an implementation that we've provided here. We're taking advantage of the VI APIs as well as the VIX APIs inside of VMware's SDK. We're not just talking about managing the host servers or ESX instance itself, but actually communicating at the API level to be able to import information and to make your job as an administrator of Xsuite easier when you're trying to deal with these VM instances. So I kind of covered a lot of ground. I showed our integration with VMware. I showed how we're able to actually record web sessions, showed how we can actually prevent unauthorized access outbound from resources as well, kind of run the gamut here. And so what I thought I would do at this time, because there have been some questions that have been asked, and I'm sure, Pat, you probably have more of a handle on that than I do. So what I'd like to do is turn it back over to you to see if we can answer any additional questions before we close things out, because I see we're at the top of the hour.
Yeah, you've done a great job taking them as we go, I think, Sean. So we'll take a break. I've been answering a couple. There's been some requests for recording of the presentation, which we will definitely send out if you're on today, or even if folks who registered and weren't able to attend, we'll send you a copy of the recording. We had a couple of requests for the AWS version of the presentation, so we'll get you a link to that and send it out as well. But if we have any other technical questions for Sean, go ahead and pop them into the box, and we'll try to answer them. If you're shy and want to do that later, we're happy with that. We'd be able to be more than happy to take those questions one-on-one if you need to set up a session and ask some specific things to see how this might work in your environment. But we'll just take a quick second here. It looks like we might have cleared all of them, Sean. So I guess that's the good news, and we'll be able to relinquish our time. We're finished right on time. We're at just a minute past the hour, so I guess we can wrap it now. So on behalf of Sean and myself and the Xsuite team, thanks for joining us. Very happy to have you. If you'd like us to follow up with you, please reach out. You can phone us or contact us through the website. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions or set up some specific times for our team to take you through some of the functionality as it applies to your environment. With that, we'll bid adieu. Have a great afternoon, and again, thanks for joining us.